As many? The chair recognizes the honourable member for Kalani.
We might as well just go through because then I don't have to come back at 3 o'clock. Thank you very much, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, before I start, I want to especially send out condolence to the family of Rudy Meadows, who had died just recently in Grand Bahama. He's a personal friend of mine, and he was very instrumental, played a pivotal role in me winning the election in 2007, as he had a wealth of political exposure and experience, and he guided me through and demonstrated great political maturity. I would miss him, Mr. Deputy, and Rudy was a personal friend, and I send my condolence out to the family. But Mr. Deputy, I rise on behalf of Kalani constituency to make my contribution to this Environmental Planning and Protection Amendment Bill 2024. But before addressing the legislation, Mr. Deputy, I have the recurrent complaints. I must once again note the terrible dysfunction and widespread disorganization of this government. And I had addressed this matter repeatedly, and the disorganization before the House unfortunately starts at the very top. And the Prime Minister, like his last predecessor, is known for being late. Mr. Deputy, this administration is utterly incapable of organizing their business before Parliament in an organized and timely manner. This don't care and late again attitude results in their continuously notifying members of the last minute about legislation to be debated. They repeatedly pull legislation at the last minute. So, Mr. Deputy, why is the PLP incapable of organizing a medium to long-term legislative agenda? The sad reality is that they do not have a real legislative agenda. And because of this, they keep scrapping to see what they can get before the House in order to make it look like they are actually doing something. They treat Parliament, Mr. Deputy, as an extension of their relentless public relations mindset, which they have substituted for governance. Mr. Deputy, on Friday, I received a communication about 7:45 p.m. that we were debating the immigration bill, and I commenced preparation, doing all the necessary research on the immigration bill, only to be informed Monday at 3:45 p.m. that we're not doing the immigration bill anymore. We would be doing the environmental bill. Having prepared for a previous bill, I now had one day to prepare again for a different bill.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for St. Anne's.
No lunch today.
Well, we have an agenda for the House. It's delivered here every sitting. It currently has 2, 4, and bearing in mind that they talk about us doing our work, they should be prepared for all of these on any day. But, Mr. Deputy Speaker, I cannot say what Kalani was told. They may not like him. They may not tell him what we tell them. But they were advised that we'd intended to debate the Immigration Act bill as well as this bill. They said they couldn't do 2 in a day. We decided, in the spirit of regatta, to give them their 1 bill a day on this day, although on Monday we intend to do 2. And one of the bills was the bill that we are debating today. They were notified of that from the beginning.
Yes.
Quite clearly, they do not keep Kalani in the know. Maybe they're punishing him for what he did to them last administration.
Thank you, honourable member.
Thank you, Mr. Deputy. Mr. Deputy, I would not utilize my time to respond to utter nonsense. But I know your tricks. I know your tricks, but I won't waste my time on nonsense. 2.5 years in office, Mr. Deputy, the PLP have little to show except worsening crime, higher food and light bills, prices, higher cost of living, increases in taxes, immigration crisis, a healthcare system collapsing, and new scandals every week. Mr. Deputy, the Bahamas is a beautiful country with the most stunning ocean waters in the world. I am reminded of the Canadian and American astronauts who looked down from space, mesmerized by the wonder of the waters of our archipelago of wonders. We must protect the blessings God granted us.
No, not that one.
And those of us in this generation in Parliament must make sure the gifts of this nation are preserved for generations and generations to come. And this bill, Mr. Deputy, and the subsequent regulations amend the Environmental Planning and Protection Act, providing for increased penalties regarding certain offenses. The penalties are intended to serve as a deterrent, thus protecting our environment. In simple terms, the stiff fines are meant to stop people from even thinking about violating our environmental laws. This bill, Mr. Deputy, also provides a definition for environmentally sensitive areas. It also introduces spot fines, and pursuant to the Act, offenders would receive a notice issued by an environmental officer or maritime inspector. The offender would use the notice to pay or contest the fine in a magistrate court. I support this legislation, but bills and laws are bills or laws. Mr. Deputy, it is useless to come to Parliament, debate bills after bills, pass laws, but yet do not enforce them. Laws must be enforced, and the most important thing to move this country forward is enforcement. If we had one thing to do, enforce the laws. We have a beautiful country, and many people would love to visit the Bahamas, but our laws must be enforced, Mr. Deputy. When the challenges we face, not only in Kalani, but throughout this country, littering. We have not enforced the laws with respect to littering. Dumping. We clean our areas, and the following day there are refrigerators and mattresses all over the place that we must clean again. People understand that we are not a country of law enforcers, and therefore they do as they see fit. In the meantime, the country continues to deteriorate while we come here, debate all sorts of laws and legislation, but do not follow it through. It's a complete waste of time. We're pontificating in here with bills that we don't enforce. Mr. Deputy, noise pollution is a serious offense in my constituency, and yet you call day after day, night after night, and still no enforcement. Building violations being built all over the place, no enforcement. Voyage cafes with no permits being built throughout the country, no enforcement. And then I see on social media the other day, police, students fighting police. What are we going to? You have lost respect for the law enforcement officers. Lost respect. Mr. Deputy, I have the greatest respect for the police. They are doing an excellent job under the circumstances. And Mr. Deputy, we must continue to respect and help our officers. My administration took environmental protection seriously. By example, when we came to office, there was a serious environmental and public health issue at the New Providence landfill. Hazardous smoke from landfill fires regularly spread across the islands, and depending on the direction of the wind, affected us especially in the west. The smoke was a serious threat to nearby residents. It was also a threat to our economy, Mr. Deputy, as Bahama is near the area. When we came to office, we had a meeting with Bahama, who pointed out that their investment was in jeopardy or being compromised because of the fumes, the scent, and the smokes that were affecting the area, and the tourists, the guests were complaining. We looked at that as the #1 issue, the saving our economy and the hotel within the Western Hemisphere, in Western area. We jumped on that issue and resolved the problem. It's now an ecological park. The plan was to replicate that type of park and dump setting throughout the Bahamas so that we would move away from this indiscriminate dumping, etc. Mr. Deputy, you would not want to know how the sewage within the family island, where it's disposed of. You would not want to know. You would be frightened of eating certain things within this country. But those must be addressed. They are hazardous within the family islands. The sewage are dumped indiscriminately. Those in the family islands can tell us. They know. Dumped indiscriminately in bush here, there, and everywhere. And we eat from those environments. We eat. Our plan for the landfill was successful. The problem of regular large-scale fires was resolved. And having created an ecological park, Mr. Deputy, I'm happy to announce that the plan that they were discussing to establish a graveyard in the dump site had been abandoned. But I wonder if they realized that within dump there are underground fires. They're underground fires, chemical reactions. And therefore, if you buried me in the grave site, I was buried in whole. There's a possibility of me being cremated.
That's right. That's right.
Underground fires.
The chair recognizes the honourable member for Freetown.
I know Kalani as a doctor knows that when he passes, what happens to his body will not affect his consciousness at all. But he comes back to this. He comes back to this narrative that South Beach had disabused him and the Bahamian public on by producing the actual survey plans that shows that his assertion is not only misleading this House, but misleading the Bahamian people.
Thank you, honourable member.
My colleague there for trying to distract me from keeping on course. But I have all the data here on my phone, Mr. Deputy. I would gladly show you the information. Do you want me to table my phone? Mr. Deputy, I tabled my phone. You still can't open it. Mr. Deputy. But I'm happy you abandoned it. I'm happy you abandoned it. I'm happy. But for those who want to see where it was initially being constructed, drive the Milo Butler Highway and you'll see the clearance. That was the entrance, etc. The evidence is still there. Mr. Deputy, it is somewhat amusing and perplexing to watch this Prime Minister traveling the world, trying to talk big and strong on climate change. First of all, you reach. Brave Davis is no mere motley. Second, this is the same man who was the lawyer for an oil drilling company. The truth is that the PLP and this Prime Minister have no real environmental or climate agenda other than PR and talk. The Prime Minister likes to travel to conferences to pretend. He calls it confidence. What a joke. A big joke that is. He talks about climate change when sightseeing abroad. Then he flies back home and does nothing, even after burning up all of that fossil fuel and putting more carbon in the atmosphere. Look around, Mr. Deputy. They have done little that is substantive on climate change or the environment. Back in 2009, the previous FNM Prime Minister, the Right Honorable Hubert Alexander Ingram, addressed the press before leaving the United Nations 15th Climate Change Conference in Denmark. He said at that time, and I quote, "In Copenhagen, I will be joined by fellow CARICOM leaders and leaders from throughout the world who recently met in Trinidad and Tobago to forge a consensus on one of the more complex and pressing issues I have dealt with over 3 non-consecutive terms as Prime Minister." The former Prime Minister went on and stated,
Member.
I rise to move that the House sits beyond 1 p.m. to permit Kalani to complete his contribution.
It has been moved and seconded that the business of the House do continue beyond 1 p.m. As many as are in favor will remain seated. Those opposed will stand. The motion is carried. The business of the House will continue beyond 1 p.m. As many, the chair recognizes the honorable member for Kalani.
the former Prime Minister stated, while matters of national security, including crime and immigration, are at the forefront of the national agenda, as is vigorously responding to the current economic crisis, my government also has the urgent task of responding to the multiple challenges, short and long term, posed by global warming and its related effects on the Bahamas. Climate change is also a national security issue, as it poses a direct and potentially devastating threat to our way of life, our territorial integrity, our economic well-being, and our survival. Hubert Ingram also stated, our efforts to mitigate the effects of climate change and protect our future also include the development of strategies and programs in the areas of energy generation, including renewable energy, disaster preparedness and management, biodiversity protection, forest preservation, water and sewage management, and land use. Mr. Deputy, the FNM has a comprehensive record on the environment. Over our initial 3 terms in office, the FNM more than doubled the national park system, bringing 700,000 acres, the amount of marine and land areas protected. This amounted to approximately 2 acres for every Bahamian citizen. To preserve and protect our natural environment, the FNM created the Bahamas Environmental Science and Technology Commission, the BEST Commission, and increased the government subvention to the Bahamas National Trust tenfold. To promote biodiversity, the FNM created and expanded marine protected areas, legislated protection of marine mammals, sharks, and marine turtles, and instituted environmental impact assessments. The national park, Mr. Deputy, was doubled, and landfill on New Providence got fixed because the FNM acted, thus saving parts, a great portion of our tourist industry, allowing these tourists to enjoy the West, the waters, the Bahamas strips, and the Bahamas. Under the PLP, they talk a good game on the environment while doing next to nothing. Mr. Deputy, I have made this comment before and I will make it again today. Legislation alone does not solve the problem. Along with it, there needs to be the necessary funding and training, and I was happy to hear what the member for Freetown said, to ensure that those designated to carry out the work of the new law can do so. Do we have the necessary number of staff and officers and vehicles and other tools to carry out inspections under this law? Or will we pass a law that will fall beside, like most previous laws, no enforcement? That's all we need in this country. Enforcement, and you would see the beauty and the success of this country and its economy. Have we set up the proper training regime to ensure those individuals are aware of the proposed new powers and how best to exercise them? The Davis administration is not known for being detail-oriented. Mr. Deputy, this administration is also not known for follow-through. It is critical that the administration makes sure this law and these regulations can work. Let's clean up our country. We only need to do one thing. Prioritize. Enforcement must be there. We must prioritize the security system, the police. Give them everything they need. We must prioritize education. We must provide everything they need. Prioritize health. If we are to be a successful country, we must be serious about it. Don't have me here pontificating, agreeing with the law, knowing that when we come out, it's only going on the shelf. For God's sake, man, let's do better. Mr. Deputy, I wish to express my grave concern regarding yet another example of how this New Day administration is breaking down the norms and how we are governed. The Auditor General is a constitutional office. It is an independent, non-political office designed to provide oversight of the expenditures of public funds. The office should be regarded with respect. It is constitutionally protected. In his review of the 2023 Carifta and Bahamas Games spending, the Auditor General's report indicated various policies regarding requests for funds, procurement and purchasing, and allocation of funds were not properly adhered to. The cost overrun was in the millions of dollars. There were people hired who had nothing to do with the various games. The Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture was given an opportunity to respond. The ministry ignored the Auditor General. It failed to respond. Mr. Deputy, I've served in the highest office of the land as Prime Minister. The procedure is straightforward. The Auditor General makes a draft report that is sent to the Permanent Secretary or the agency responsible and asks for their response. After that, the Auditor General incorporates their response, finalize his report, and send it to you, the Speaker, who subsequently allows it to be tabled. They did not respond. They did not respond. Now, in the Nassau Guardian this past Monday, we read comments by the chairman of the local organization committee for Carifta, describing the work of the Auditor General as, and listen to me, Bahamas, telling a constitutionally protected officer position, they are talking, I quote, garbage and stupid. Can you imagine? Can you imagine? That language is unbecoming, Mr. Deputy. This administration should not allow this type of abuse of the office of the Auditor General. Will the Prime Minister, and I ask, will the Prime Minister join me in demanding that the head of the committee immediately apologize to the Auditor General? That position, similar to that of the police commissioner, is constitutionally protected. We must respect those individuals. We must respect them. And yes, and I may have I had to call the Commissioner of Police last night, Mr. Deputy, because of fire in the Kalani constituency, the South Ocean area. And within a matter of minutes, the Commissioner of Police responded. And he had individuals within the area dealing with that because we were exposed to smoke, individuals were having respiratory problems, etc. But the police responded. And I say here, while I'm on my feet, that if at any time I, Hubert Alexander Minnis, may have said anything while the commissioner served as commissioner that was insulting or negative or derogatory to him, I publicly apologize. His office must be protected and respected. Between the Carifta expenditure and the Bahamas Jubilee Games, there was 7-figure over expenditure by this administration. The Prime Minister, Mr. Deputy, must do better to maintain the standards of our system of government. Standards have been falling for some time with this administration. Standards are deteriorating even further. Even by the low standards of the PLP, this is yet another low. Will the Prime Minister demand that the Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture respond to the Auditor General's report? This is the latest example of the PLP refusing to answer questions.
The chair recognizes the member for Freetown.
No, I know that Kalani's contribution may have been written before this morning, but the member for Garden Hills has in fact responded. He's made a communication. He's laid the statements. He's indicated that he's requested his PS to set a meeting with the Ministry and the Auditor General.
Please, come to work on time.
If the member have, Mr. Deputy, if the member have, I am matured enough to withdraw such statement, and I am matured enough to apologize to the member for saying, for requesting certain things of him that he had answered previously. And I hope that many of you are matured enough to do what you should do. Mr. Deputy, we will have, we still have conflicting stories on the 200,000 BMW. We still do not know who paid for the private jet the Prime Minister went on to Botswana, how many people he took on this trip, and how much that sightseeing trip cost. What about the payments for the PLP's private trip to Bermuda? Are we about to see millions more in cost overruns for the Ministry of Youth, Sports and Culture for upcoming sports events? Will the relays have a cost overrun in the millions of dollars? Is the ministry, will this Prime Minister continue to allow abusive language to be directed at our Auditor General? If the Prime Minister fails to request and to get the head of the committee to apologize, then his silence would mean consent. Such silent consent of the abuse of a constitutional officer will mean another grave low by this PLP government and our Prime Minister. The country awaits the Prime Minister's response. Mr. Deputy, our constitutionally protected officers and our public servants must not be abused as is being done by our Auditor General. Mr. Deputy, may I conclude by asking one further question? If you all give me more time, I could speak longer. The Minister The Minister of Youth, Sports and Culture has told the country that China is repairing the national stadium at no cost to the Bahamian people. China is reportedly spending $36 million fixing the stadium. That's a lot of money, more than I have. Is there...
Today, Monday after day. And one account.
That's cash. That's cash. I don't have that in cash. And my disclosure says what I have. My disclosure has what I have. That's public knowledge. That's a lot of money. Is there any connection? Is there any connection between this free fixing of the stadium and the proposed $290 million loan the Davis administration seeks from China for the so-called specialty hospital it says it will build? The public needs clarity on these transactions. Mr. Deputy, again, Kalani approves and supports this legislative amendment. But again, Mr. Deputy, I think one of our greatest follies within the Bahamas is we pass and we brag among each other as to who passed the most legislation. The PLP comes in and they brag that they passed 100 legislation. The FNM comes in and we brag that we passed 102 legislation. And the goal and objective is to beat the FNM the next term so that you pass more legislation. But the bottom line, if we enforce the ones that we have here, we need not be racing, competing among each other as to who passed the most legislation. Let's compete and see who is successful in making this country beautiful again. Let's compete in making this country even better, more successful, creating opportunities for all. And that can be done by doing simple measures. Enforce our laws. They are there. The littering should stop. The dumping should stop. Let the tourists see our Bahamas as a Singapore. We have the potential. It's in our hand. But passing laws will not resolve the problem. Thank you, Mr. Deputy.
Thank you, Honourable Member.